I'm Christine. Welcome to the Recovering Perfectionist Podcast, where I empower you to develop sustainable habits, challenge society, and take messy action. It's time to align with the universe for the full human experience and redefine what it really means to be successful.
It's too good, the secret is out and wow.
Welcome back to the Recovering Perfectionist Podcast, Season 7. We are collaborating this season with the dance wellness community. And I am so excited to introduce to you another featured practitioner for the month, Miss Tagoe. And she is a financial literacy coach and consultant and is going to teach you so many things about all things finance and how you can set yourself up for success. Welcome, Mbalia.
Thank you. And I like to say financial efficiency coach.
Love it. Love it. Financial efficiency.
Yes.
Explain to me what that means.
Yeah. So what does that mean? So I think we do talk a lot about financial literacy, right?
Okay.
And that's about just, do you understand the basic terminology? Do you understand the basic principles around finance? And that's super important. I think that's something we probably don't do enough, at least here in the US. Maybe, other parts of the world do it better. But here in the US, there isn't a whole lot of information and a lot of focus, I think, on youngsters understanding the basics,
Yes.
Even something as simple as like how does it work to have a bank account? Like that's just not a focus, right? So unless it's happening in the home, it doesn't happen. So that's kind of the financial literacy side. When I talk about financial efficiency, we're kind of going to the next level of trying to figure out what are the systems and the mechanisms I can put in place to make the most out of my financial world, right? My personal economy. How am I optimizing that to make it as efficient as possible? What are the things I can do to get to the point where every dollar is maybe doing more than just $1 worth of work for me?
Oof.
How can I have my dollar do more?
Yes.
And in a very simple way. Like that sounds like, oh, this must be some crazy, very, very arcane kind of approach, but it's actually really not once you understand it. So it's more about how am I using my money? How am I being a better steward? So rather than the literacy and understanding what my money does in a basic sense, it's more like how am I working and being a better steward of my finances? So
Yes.
that's where
there's way more intention behind it.
Absolutely. Way more intention, much more control.
Love.
Yes, intentionality is huge.
Love that. How long have you been coaching clients and working and consulting?
So ever since I became aware of some of these systems that we're going to be talking about today, it became my passion to spread the word. So kind of doing it informally, maybe starting about 5 years ago, and then decided to really kind of, really make it a true business and start working with clients 3.5 years ago.
Perfect. And who is your target client specifically? Like who are you helping out? Like what's their symptoms essentially?
Yes. So as we delve deeper into the system, you'll see how it's really applicable to anyone because it's very foundational. But a lot of the people I end up working with in my business tend to be people like me, not surprisingly.
I know, right? I feel like we're always attracting clients that are like us in the past.
Exactly. And it's very much people who find themselves kind of concerned that, maybe they have a pretty good income, but they feel as if it's not quite doing everything. Like what's happening with that income and why am I not getting more from it? The target client would be somebody, when I became aware of some of these systems, I was in a situation where I was working with my mother and we were navigating a long-term care situation because of an unfortunate diagnosis that she had for dementia. And it got to a point where, I just wasn't able to do it all on my own. We needed to reach out and get some support in the form of long-term care. And that was kind of like that first window that I started to have into these systems. And it was a situation where, unfortunately, it was kind of too late for her. because we were becoming aware of this knowledge, too when she was too far along. But it was the thing where now I understood it for myself.
Yes.
And so now I'm able to help others. On the other side of the coin, I have kids. So I'm thinking through, how am I going to set myself up to have the kind of legacy where they have the knowledge and understanding to continue generational wealth systems, where if we are talking about some kind of college education or whatever they might want to do after their sort of formative training is done, that there are systems in place to support that. So kind of sandwich generation kind of folks, folks who might be, running businesses and want to be more efficient with their capital and their businesses. So that's kind of like the sweet spot.
I love it. Yeah. Basically setting yourself up, setting your future up for success.
Yes, for success. Yeah.
It's a lot of
your future and also your now, just being efficient with what you're doing every day right now. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. Because I think that's the thing, is I think when we talk a lot about like stocks, or we talk about, long-term investment, it's always about like, well, it'll pay off in the future. It'll,
correct.
the cumulative or the compound interest and all of that stuff.
Yes.
That's what we hear a lot of. So I think what I love about what you do and why you and I have connected so well in this is the here and now of the decisions that you're making. Not only are going to affect the future, but they're also affecting how you can, play the game of life, every day.
Yes.
And that can help you actually enjoy, because this is what I teach my clients, is enjoy the house, live in the house you're building.
Yes.
And not just wait until the house is built to enjoy it.
Right. Yeah. Have a few more years of enjoyment by actually enjoying the process, not just waiting for some mythical end points.
Exactly.
And wondering when that'll probably come. That's the other part. Is like, when will I get there? Sometimes you're not quite sure.
Right. Totally. So our industry, as we know, right, has so many aspects to the financial side of things.
Right.
And specifically, we work with a lot of professionals, teachers, judges, competition owners when it comes to managing their finances. Obviously, the amateur students, they're the ones paying to dance.
Yes.
It's a very expensive industry to be a part of, but absolutely. They, for them, it's a hobby, it's a release, it's a home away from home kind of thing where they can really enjoy and participate in this industry. However, as much as, it may cost a lot for our students to dance, that doesn't always mean that you have a lot of rich professionals walking around. And I think that there's a lot of factors that go into that. One, maybe they're not charging what they should be charging. They're not managing their money right. So a lot of times when they do make a lot of money, what do they do with that money? Are they reinvesting it? Are they putting it in the right places?
Yes.
Like you said, are you making your money work for you?
For you, yeah.
And then, like you said, we don't learn any of this in school. Taxes, how to write things off, how to, how certain bank accounts to open up, certain things to do, Roth IRAs, all that stuff.
All of that
nobody
stuff,
teaches us this.
Yes.
So how important is it, especially for people in our industry, to understand how to do this in order to make their job more sustainable?
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And I think I would venture to say that it may not be about not charging enough. That might be sometimes the key, but I think it's more the nature of the business and needing to be that much more intentional because of the nature of the business, right? It's not necessarily cyclical in a seasonal kind of way, but you may have your core base of students that you're working with, right? But that probably goes up and down because it is a hobby. And so that means there isn't necessarily an absolute commitment 100% from your students to always be with you at all times. So it requires a different level of intentionality around how you're working with whatever the income streams are that are coming in. So I would hope that everybody who's going into the business side of this and actually running a studio is taking advantage of information related to your tax positioning, like getting, hopefully there are tax professionals out there who actually maybe are very knowledgeable about the business of the dance world, right? Because then it helps them understand what those opportunities are for them to structure the business in a very specific way, make sure they're taking advantages of certain write-offs. So that's absolutely critical. Like, you got to understand taxes, because when we talk about financial efficiency, I often talk about like the pillars of financial control, of financial efficiency. And one of those pillars is just really understanding your tax environment. I'm not a tax professional or a tax advisor, but it's critical to understand the tax environment within which you're working, because that is what really robs people of their financial wholeness and their wealth, is the tax structure. And we're not talking about, tax avoidance. That's what we're talking about,
No.
right?
Everything is above board here, ladies and gentlemen.
Absolutely right. And so some people are like, oh, well, you're trying to get out of paying taxes. No. We're just using the tax laws to our advantage. They exist for a reason, but unless you can understand them, you can't apply them appropriately, right? So appropriately or properly to your benefits. So there's tons of people out there doing really well because they understand the taxes. Why should that not be available to everybody?
Right.
But it starts with educating yourself, or at least aligning yourself with a professional who can guide and help. So that's one area where I think there's definite opportunity, is understand what you have access to, right? When it comes to really enhancing your tax position, because you got to lower that. We're always looking for ways to make sure we keep more of what we make, so have more work for us.
Right. And that's why we live in this country. You know what I mean? Like, you have to understand that for those who don't know the dance industry very well, but again, this is targeted towards the dance industry. We all come from different countries.
Yes.
So we all moved to the United States for that, original American dream. Correct. And the concept here is that we can, there are certain things in place for entrepreneurs and certain tax breaks and advantages to self-employment and things like that, owning a business that can help you to create. And I think that's the thing, is that when you come from another country, you're already trying to learn the language, understand all these things. The last thing you're going to learn, if Americans themselves are not learning these financial tools, how are they teaching them to foreigners?
How are they teaching them?
And immigrants. And so the concept here is making sure that I think I keep saying, if these episodes, or if these specific practitioners speak to you, if this is something you're having trouble with, I think that this particular episode, why I was so excited about it, is because it speaks to everybody, as you said. Yeah. And everybody can get a better understanding of their finances. Yes. I mean, unless they're like a financial, accountant or something, that they're just like, right. But the idea is
everybody learns something.
Everybody learns something. Yes. And then you can decide, because everybody's situation is also very different.
That's absolutely. Everybody is unique. But I want to go back to what you said about, so many people in the dance industry are coming from other places. And I think that's a really valid point, that there's a ton of success that comes with, I came over, I've reached a level of success, and now I'm running a business. Right. Which is maybe an opportunity that might not have been available to an individual either from where they came from or in any other country. So that's great, but it doesn't stop there. It's like now that
this is where the work begins.
It's where the work begins to continue to understand how to make it improve. So just in the way you want to increase your income, that's only one element of the spectrum. It's like, as you're increasing your income, increase your knowledge in all these other ways as well, just to support your financial wholeness and your financial wellness. I mean, this is a dance wellness community, and I like to think of it as like financial wellness, right? Which is making sure that you are whole. If you think of health, wellness from a health perspective, right? You're looking to be more in control, not really needing third-party assistance in the form of like pharmacologicals or something. Yeah. It's a very similar situation here, where you're trying to take that ownership and that control, and that just means continuing to educate yourself. It's a never, it's a lifelong process.
Absolutely. And that's why we specify it's not just mental and physical wellness, but also financial wellness. Those three
Yes.
components are so important because all three of those things are what leads you to living a free life. You
Right.
know, financial freedom is highly talked about, but not often executed.
Yes. Yes. Understood or executed.
Right.
And I think when people hear financial freedom, financial independence, it's immediately kind of like, oh, I just want to amass wealth. For me, that's not actually what it's about.
Mhm.
Because everybody can define wealth in different ways. We're all coming
True.
from it at different places. But for me, it's more like, can you assess what it is that allows you to feel comfortable? What it is that allows you to feel as if you've got everything under control?
Yes.
We can go out and amass all the wealth we want. Doesn't mean that we're being efficient with it. Doesn't mean like it's
Right.
the classic thing of like, um, all you do is make more money and my problems will go away. Well, that's not the case,
No, it creates
right?
more
Money
problems a
doesn't
lot of
bring,
times. Yeah.
yes, oftentimes it brings more problems. Or
Yeah.
if you've just got some fundamental habits that are just out of whack, it doesn't matter how much money you make, you're
True.
still going to be not in the best
Right.
position. So it's
Yeah.
more about understanding those fundamental principles and then starting to create those better habits that then allow you, like, kind of almost regardless of your income level, to feel like you're in control and having that financial control and that you're being as efficient as possible, you're good.
Right. Yeah. More money, more problems, unless
Unless,
you understand the financial aspects.
yes, yes,
Um, okay, so two scenarios here. You
yes,
have someone who is maybe like top teacher all the time, runs a successful studio, making very, very good money. I want you to describe to us how you would advise this person to manage their finances. And then you have the person who is kind of the struggling teacher who is, paycheck to paycheck, but really wants to get good at their finances. What would be the
right,
next steps for them? Can we
right.
discuss
Okay.
that?
So let's go with somebody who seems like all cylinders are firing. So with this person, we're going to assume that not only are they're successful on, within their business on the dance floor, and they're making the income. So then the question is, well, what are you doing with that? And
Right.
it all comes to, what are your goals? So
Mm.
you had mentioned earlier that everybody's situation is different. That couldn't be more true.
Right.
There is just no cookie cutter for anybody. It all comes down to, what are you trying to achieve in your life journey and what do you want to do? Because the financial piece, all that's doing is helping support you achieve your goals,
Right. It's
right?
funding the goals.
It's funding the goals. It's not really the goal in and of I mean, I guess somebody out there could have just have a goal of, like, I just want to have
Make a lot of
X,
money.
yeah, X amount of money for what? I don't know.
Sure.
Usually we want the money because we want to do something
Right.
with
It's
it.
not the money that it's the
It's
freedom,
the
it's the
freedom,
travel, it's
right?
the
And the
whatever it is you're going to
ability
spend
to
it
do the
on.
things we want to do,
Right.
right? So what that looks like is going to be totally different from person to person to person,
Sure.
right? And are you trying to own a home? That's what some people's,
Hmm.
thing is. They don't have one yet and they're trying to do it. Or maybe they have their home, but now they want to get into other ways of investing that don't involve the stock market. Maybe they want to go into real estate investing or something like that, but they need a sustainable way to enter those additional investment properties. You maybe have somebody who is unsure about how to go about financing their child's education. So it's going to be a whole spectrum of
Yeah.
options of what somebody would want to do. So that's where, any opportunity to sit down with somebody and start to advise them is going to stem in either situation, actually.
Right.
Where are you trying to get to?
Yeah.
Now,
What's the
the
end goal?
person who is fairly flush with their cash flow, obviously easier place to start from. So once we identify what your goals happen to be, then it's a matter of, okay, what systems do you already have put in place? Are you already investing? Are you in the stock market? Are you doing other things? And understanding that. Now let's talk about the stock market for a little bit, because
Yeah.
you mentioned that there isn't necessarily a lot of education put on the stock market, and I agree with that. People know it's out there.
Right.
Not everybody necessarily understands how to get in, and nobody necessarily understands how it operates. So
Right.
people who maybe could be in there playing don't, because they're concerned, or they don't have enough education and just kind of like willy-nilly kind of in
Right.
a haphazard manner go after it. Neither one is good, as a good approach. And then you have the people, which is probably the majority of people in this country, who are invested in the stock market because they have like a 401k or something, or they have an IRA, right?
Right.
And so that's their opportunity to invest in the stock market. So with what I do, I don't focus on the stock market. That's not my thing. Am I in the stock market myself? Yeah, in a small way I am. But I don't advise the reason why I got into this business is not to advise people in the stock market. And I'll tell you what. It has had a long history of good performance over the long term. No doubt, the data's there, right?
Right.
But like you said, it's very much a long-term thing.
Right.
And if you're doing it from a perspective of like a 401k or an IRA, then the question is, that's where the taxes come back into it of like, do you really understand what you're signing up for from a tax burden perspective, right?
Right.
So I would never tell someone, hey, don't invest in the stock market, don't open a 401k. But I will tell people to really think critically about whether or not that's the best option for them, right? Because it is sort of some out in the air, and we've seen it before. Thankfully, it hasn't happened a lot more recently on a broad scale, but we all know what happened in and the downturn, where people thought they were ready to retire and okay, let's go grab our nest egg out of a 401k, and it just wasn't there for them.
Yeah.
It's a timing thing, kind of a little bit like of a gamble, right? Because you just don't have that much control over it. So that's not my first avenue. It's not what
and in the short term, the stock market is very volatile.
In the short term, that's why it is a very long-term thing.
Correct.
So you have the people who think, oh, well, I can day trade. Ooh, good luck to you, right?
Yeah, that's a skill in and of itself. Yeah,
a really it's a skill, and it takes a lot of dedication and time. And
right.
I mean, I just don't know how many people are really successful at that who aren't doing it as their true job.
Right.
And so to try and get into that as a independent business person, not well versed in that, it would not be my first suggestion. So that's where I like to apply the primary strategy that I use in my business is something that's called the infinite banking system. And this is a very powerful system in that the nickname for it is be your own banker. So it's essentially about taking on the financing functions of your own life, because we all need them. We all have financing functions every day in our world. So if you could own those, take them on, as opposed to giving them away to a banking entity or some other kind of financing entity, wouldn't that be very powerful? Right. So somebody who is of means, because they've already been doing well in their business, could be a great candidate for that. And that's something we would probably want to explore. If they were, already had the habits of, saving, right? They had their expenses under control. They really knew what was going on. They had a really good separation of what was happening in their business versus what was happening in their personal life. And all those fundamentals kind of existed and what were set. Then the next question is, okay, all this income, what are you doing with it? Let's look at other ways to make that more efficient. And that's where the IBC, or the infinite banking concept, can really come into play and work well for that person, allowing them to keep more of what they make and just to be more intentional and have more control over how they're using those funds. Right.
Because back in the day, I know my mom would always say, Christine, you got to save. You got to open a savings account. You got to put everything into savings. You got to save, because, you know, you want to have for retirement. But what we're learning very quickly is that, and this applied to their generation as well, but now we're really understanding it to a deeper extent, is that inflation is happening all the time. And basically saving your money is losing it.
I was just advising it. It was just last Saturday we were talking, and they were very proud, and they should have been proud that they had, $40,000 in the bank. And I'm like, cool. How long has that been there? Oh, it's at least a decade of just holding on to money. I'm like, awesome. Do you realize that you've lost a ton against that?
Right.
That's done nothing for you. Good for you that you were able to hold on to it, right? And have your other expenses, use your income for other expenses and kind of preserve that. but have you any
You
clue?
should have been investing that.
You should have been doing something more with it. Now, this was more of their emergency fund kind of thing, so they didn't want to invest it. But that's the beauty when we talk about IBC, is that you can have it doing more for you without losing that option of having access to it. That's the beauty of it. It's like having it work for you while you still have access to it. And that's what you don't get in a bank, because in a bank, you're losing to inflation, like you said.
Yep.
And depending on what's happening with the inflationary environment, like who knows what that's going to be.
Right.
So every day you're losing, like what are banks giving now? Like, I don't know, 0.1% or whatever.
Oh, it's terrible.
Unless you have a high yield savings bank account. And even with a high yield savings bank,
I was just going to say, even with a high yield,
you won't necessarily keeping up with inflation. So, and then once you need to access the money, you grab it, you go do your thing, it's gone. It's gone. It's done one job and that's it. And if we had a way to have that dollar do the thing you needed it to do, but actually still grow, wouldn't that be amazing?
It almost duplicates itself.
It almost duplicates itself. Over time, it will. And that's the power of the system, and what I try to educate people about. That kudos first, kudos for having the money in the bank.
Right. But now
we gotta level up. We gotta level up.
Totally. Absolutely.
You're not doing yourself any favors by keeping it there.
Absolutely. Let's go back to the other person.
So the other person, that's a little bit more of a journey. That's a little bit more of like, sometimes it's not necessarily that there are bad habits. It's just maybe we're not at a point in our business where the income is quite yet outpacing the expenses, right? So that could be the situation, but oftentimes it's habits. And so it's sitting down and starting to really scrub through. So every client is individual. We meet you where you are, and we try to build up a system in order for you to get to a point of being stable and having a good foundation off of which to work. So then we can start to implement some of these other strategies. If it's a person who actually doesn't have bad habits and just is trying to get to the point where they can increase their income, then we look at whether there are other opportunities to increase income. Because in order for the systems I work with to work, you do need free cash flow. Positive cash flow is a critical piece of it. It's a very difficult system to get into if you're barely sort of making it. If you don't have any free cash flow and there's no positive at the end of the month, it's really tough to get into that. It starts to eat itself, if you will. So if good habits are in place and we're just looking at, hey, is there a period of time where we're maybe looking to stretch ourselves a little bit and look for some other opportunities to make some extra income? Because you really just do. Either make extra income, or let's really take a really sharp eye at those expenses. Let's take a really sharp eye, someone we're talking about back at the top of the meeting, the call on taxes, right? Like are things structured to benefit you in the best way as it comes to what's going out? So we're just going to chip at those things. What's going out? Is that, the best structure for you? Let's minimize those. What are those expenses? Is everything that's an expense? Like, how serious are you? So if you're really trying to create that positive cash flow, then we're going to have to look at those expenses with a really, really critical eye, try to get that down, and get to the point where we can start to get that buffer. Because you need something to work with. In order to build, you're going to need to have something to work with, right?
Totally.
And so that is part of just sort of making sure we've got habits, having a plan that allows you to then be able to build that cushion, so that then you can start to look at it. And the thing with the infinite banking concept is that you can start small. It doesn't have to be that you've got, I mentioned the client who had, tens of thousands of dollars. But you don't need that. You don't need that. You do need free cash flow, but it doesn't need to be gobs of money. So we structure these systems to meet you where you are and to meet you for your goals. And somebody's able to get start to see the efficiency of their system sooner. Obviously, they have more to start with. But the point is to be doing something positively that's going to get you in the direction where you want to go. And what do they say? What's the best time to plant a tree? It was probably
yesterday.
Well, it was like 20 years ago, right? Or 10 years ago.
Yeah.
The next best time is like now, right? So the sooner you can get going with your system, the better. But obviously, you want to do it in a way that's sustainable.
Yeah, absolutely. You speak so many of these words that you use, just like they just give me warm fuzzies all over. It's systems is my thing. I love a good system. You know that.
Yes.
In fact, that's what I put a lot in the Dance Wellness Community newsletter is like, I think it's very important for people to understand there's a system for everything.
Yes.
And if you don't have one, it's because you haven't learned it yet or you
Yes.
haven't created it.
Correct.
But also, I want to bounce back here for a second to the habits you keep mentioning,
Yes,
because I think it's very important. I think habits is such a buzzword in so many different areas, but specifically when we talk about financial habits, you know, I think logically, someone who doesn't really know anything about financial habits can say, well, yeah, a bad habit would be that I buy coffee every single day and spend, $4.50 on a cup of coffee, or they're spending it on, for me specifically, I think a bad financial habit is when people have money, or even when you don't have that much money, but you're budgeting. People ask us how we do things all the time. They think we're really rich based on how we live our life. No, but I'm also not buying the newest iPhone. I'm not buying the Gucci Prada purses or the fancy shoes. I look good and I feel good, but I spend my money on travel and experiences. And that is what, again, going back to what you said, the goals, right? Those are my goals, or as I like to call them, core values of like, I think it's important to spend money on travel because I would like that. But I also think that like buying an asset versus buying a liability, putting things, if you have a good credit card that gives you points back, and, we get a lot of free flights from that, but we spend it on our business, which means we're reinvesting into our business, which means our business is going to then make money and pay off the card versus just taking a credit card, right, that has $10,000, $15,000 on it, and you buy a car that's going to depreciate in value.
Yes. So what you said, the last 30 seconds of everything you said, you started off with, oh, I don't know that much about finances. And then you went on to basically tell everybody that.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. I love that. That's so funny that you say that. And that actually makes me feel really good. It means that the work is working.
Yes.
But my parents know this. I've said this to them. They did not raise my brother and I with financial literacy or efficiency or education. They did not have it. They had lots of issues with their own finances and, stumbling through things and figuring it out as they go. And it did not end well. They got into some holes. They got out of the holes. I mean, it's a whole thing.
Yeah.
However, us seeing that, some of it was like, oh, it scared us maybe away from some credit cards, it scared, that kind of thing.
Yes.
But eventually you have to take a risk, and you have to understand that like now we have more information. We have the internet, we have Google, we have all these different things. We have people like you who are coaching in financial efficiency and all of these types of things and financial education.
Right.
But also for me, it's like, I know that I didn't grow up with that. There are some, they always say like the rich teach the rich differently. For those who have heard that, rich kids learn different things, about how money works because they want to stay rich within the family. Right. However, and I think that's the thing is also back in the day, talking about money was very taboo.
You didn't do it.
It was like talking about sex. You just don't do it.
You don't do it. Yeah.
And so we don't ask how much money people make. We don't talk about money. We don't, discuss those types of things because it's very rude.
Right.
And
taboo.
How are you ever going to get ahead or understand how the system works? Because really the system is rigged against you. So you have to understand how to play the game.
Yes.
If we don't discuss it and we don't talk about different tools and tactics that other people are using, like you talked about tax strategies in order to get ahead. And I had a friend of mine who we discussed this because we're millennials. So we're kind of in that transition of like the boomer generation and then like Gen Z who talks about everything. And one of my girlfriends was like, oh my gosh, like, can I just ask you some questions? Because she saw this, there were certain things we were doing with our businesses and stuff. And she was starting to grow a business. And she, after like a 30-minute conversation, she was like, oh my gosh, I feel so much smarter. And I feel like so much more empowered and educated on how I can move forward and what I can do with this credit card and all this different stuff. And I said, and I told her, I said, I know this much of it. Can you imagine like the iceberg that's living under the surface of what is possible in this world? And I think that's what you're showing people is you're showing people the huge iceberg potential of what can be done with not that much money to start.
Not to start. Yeah. So you said a lot of really important things. So number one, knowledge is power, right? So you don't know
Amen.
what you don't know.
Yes.
And talk about the iceberg. So like there's like the known unknowns, which is like,
Yeah.
sitting up here, and then there's the unknown unknowns, which are like,
Yes.
there's stuff I don't know that I don't even know that I don't know.
Right.
Right?
That's hilarious.
But being able to be in a place where you can start to have a conversation and start to talk about certain situations and how to navigate those is just really powerful. So being in a place where you feel like you have access to resources to learn, whether it's the internet or whatever, or just have conversations. You're right. It just doesn't happen. Even today, it still doesn't happen, right? Like there's a past generation thing, but even now it's still kind of like this touchy
all of this stuff, that's why this whole umbrella of wellness, because I was just talking to our confidence and mindset coach. We were talking about vulnerability and emotions and putting yourself out there and all these different things, and like there are so many things that make people uncomfortable, and it's taboo, and whether it makes you uncomfortable or it makes your grandma uncomfortable to talk about it, like whoever that is, that generation, it's so important to understand that like not talking about it is never going to solve the problem. And you're never going to get ahead, whether it be in your mental health, in your physical health. Our grandparents have passed away from very, very traumatic illnesses. And we now know how to prevent a lot of those. And so in a physical aspect, why would we make the same mistakes they made when we know how to fix some of those things, don't smoke, don't drink, don't eat processed sugar. Like a lot of the things our grandparents did, we know now not to do.
Them, yeah.
And finances are the same. There are so many things that have evolved over time. Like you said, there are certain historical significances that we know are consistent, that we follow. But for the most part, we're able to understand that the more we learn about these things, the better educated we can be, and we can use that to intentionally move the needle and create the generational, I think that's the trendy buzzword right now, is generational wealth.
Generational wealth, yeah.
That so many people are trying to do, that you have these TikTokers that are becoming millionaires overnight and all of these different things. And it's like, what do I do with that money? They don't even know.
No,
It's more money than they can fathom, but there's so many good things you can do with it.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
So, absolutely.
Go ahead.
Let's go back to the habits thing, right? So you made gave some examples. Yeah. So I want to say, like, I'm not the person who's going to tell you don't have a Starbucks coffee every day.
Right.
It all depends on your particular situation, your goals, and your intentionality. Right. If you're having that Starbucks coffee because that's a plan for you, in the month, and you are dedicated and know that you can afford that, and that brings you joy, have your Starbucks coffee.
That's it.
Right?
Live in the house you're building.
Exactly. The thing is, the people who are just like, oh, I feel like a Starbucks coffee, and it's unintentional and just doing because it's a momentary feel good, and it's robbing them. It's literally robbing them. It's robbing their health and it's robbing their wealth.
Right.
That's the habit we're trying to get about. So if it's super intentional, I mean, the reason why I would tell you not to get Starbucks is not because of your finances, but because of your health, probably. Unless we can see that actually these Starbucks coffee are robbing you of your wealth. And I'm probably going to say, hey, you want to have another look at it. So there's no cookie can I answer on the habits, right?
Sure.
The habits come down to you being able to connect with your goal and understanding what it's going to take for you to get there. And the little things you do every day that delay you, retard your progress, and increase the likelihood that you won't ever achieve your goal, right? And so for different people, that's going to be different things. And depending on where you're starting from, like if you don't have the Starbucks coffee, you'll probably get where you're going a lot sooner. But it doesn't necessarily mean mean
how fast do you want to get there?
How fast you want to get there. But you want the journey to be enjoyable. So if that's part of your joy is to have this as part of the journey, let's just plan for it, and we can actually make that part of the journey. So the habits comes to like the intentionality drives the habits, right?
Right.
I want to be healthy, and therefore I'm going to not eat the processed sugar, right? And I'm going to get my appropriate amount of sleep, and I'm going to work out. Like all those kinds of things are habits that I'm building to support my physical health journey the same is true with the financial health journey. We assess what we need to do because, oh, by the way, on a health journey, not everybody needs to necessarily work out the exact same way in order to be able to get the same results. We're learning, right?
That's right.
Everything is individual. Same is true with finances, where it's going to be your individual journey of what you need to do to make sure you can hit your goals.
Sure.
And it gets kind of granular. Where you're going to need to dive deep, and really understand your situation and kind of do it on a month by month basis, particularly that kind of like second category of somebody who's like trying to figure out how to get into a flow. You're really going to have to dig deep, make it very, very granular. Nobody likes a budget. Budgeting is important.
Yeah.
When you're on a financial
I don't know.
journey.
I think for me, budgeting sound like, I don't know, maybe I think of it differently and maybe don't call it budgeting, but I think that like I always like to say balling on a budget, because I love finding the deal, and I love being able to do extravagant things like, like renting a boat to go to Saint-Tropez in the south of France, and then finding out that it's actually not as expensive as everyone thinks it is, because I did the research to figure out how to utilize my resources in order to do what I needed to do. And not everything has to be tens of thousands of dollars to make it happen.
Absolutely.
There are other ways. And that's just because of the world we're living in. We live in a really great time.
Yes.
So yeah, I think budgeting can be fun because it's almost like a challenge. And it's like when I do get a great deal, I'm like, oh my gosh, look, and I did that for half the price that so-and-so did.
Right.
And
but starting from that, so that's good. It's like the finding the deals and doing, making sure the dollar can go farther.
Yes.
That's a version of that, right? But before you even get there, you have to know. You would be surprised and shocked how many people don't even know what they have to work with.
Knowing their numbers.
That is so important. You have to know your numbers.
I'm not surprised at all. I've talked to so many people about their budget, and they're like, I'm like, oh my God, you don't even know your numbers. They don't know their expenses during the month. They don't know their income. They're like, well, especially, and you know what? This ties really beautifully back into the dance community, because specifically, we are constantly, like you said, we have seasons that are higher. And my husband and I, same thing. We have a low season and we have a high season. And we budget during the high season for our low season, so that because our expenses are the same all across the board the whole year.
They're not going anywhere.
Right. So we have to, when we have high income here and low income here, and our expenses are the same, we have to make sure we balance it out ourselves, whether we're saving, we're spending less here, we're spending more here, whatever it is.
Absolutely.
But the income, where people are getting it from a client here, doing a one-off job here, a dance gig here, a performance here, like all that money comes in to make your total income for the month.
Yes.
And that is very important to know how, like, not even know, but also be intentional about how to make that monthly goal. So I think that's the thing, is a lot of people don't have a monthly goal. They're like, well, last month I made $2,000 and this month I made 15 and then I made 5. And then it's like, whoa, how do you work like that?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I meant with, like, when we're talking about income, like, oh, well, my income isn't where I need to be. Well, we're going to need to be a little more intentional, because we need to know what our minimum goal is. And that's where I was getting to, like, are there other opportunities to bridge gaps, right? How far ahead are we thinking?
If your goal is to make $10,000 a month and you're at 7 in week 3, like, how are we making $3,000?
How are we making 3? Yes.
Like, where are we going for that? What are the things we could pull, and who can we, what do we do?
Exactly. So, so it always starts with, like, understanding kind of like some bare minimum expectation of what the income is going to be, but then how can we supplement that, and what are we going to do in order to make sure we can hit our goal every month? So yeah, you're absolutely right. That's a whole piece of it. It's like, you got to know your numbers, because you got to know where you're at. You got to know where you want to go to allow you to come up with a plan for how to bridge that gap and how to get there. And then it's also the expense side of the house. Like, it's not just it's the expenses of what's the routine expenses, but it's also understanding that, what we like to say, paying yourself first. And it's not paying yourself to go spend it.
Right.
But paying yourself in order to be able to preserve and build on that is such a key component of it. And we kind of want to do that first. And we often think of it backwards, of like, oh, I have all these expenses, so I got to, like, settle all the expenses. And then when I'm done, whatever's left is what I'm going to work with. And it's like, that's a recipe for always being on the treadmill.
That's it. Yeah.
We need to flip it a little bit and make sure that we are as important as all those other things out there.
Correct.
But we got to know our numbers. We got to know what it is that we need to have come in. We got to know what's going out, and we got to know what cushion we're looking for and how we're going to build that to happen.
Right.
So in order to be able to ball on a budget, you first got to have that budget. You first got to understand what those numbers are. You got to understand your daily expenses. Those are a killer. The daily expenses are a killer.
Yeah. And if you make extra money that month, great. Like then you can allocate that and maybe, even it out when you have a lower month.
A low month.
But
exactly.
trying to be intentional about trying to create some consistency and some stability.
You've got to have that kind of like that stable, and then everything is kind of above that. And what we try to do is get to a point where, because your expenses are probably not going to they're not going to vary and fluctuate too much. If we can establish that stable baseline, then everything else becomes a boon that we want to not just spend because, we got an up month. I covered my expenses, so let's go party. Let's plan. Like maybe that happens a couple times a year, but mostly we're wanting to hold on to that and have that work for us in different ways. Yeah.
Totally.
And like I said, I'm never going to be the person who tells you, not to invest in the stock market, but let's have a solid foundation from which we're doing that. Right. So if we're trying
some more guarantee. Yeah. Stock market's not guarantee.
Yeah.
So that being said, sliding right into something else that I think is extremely important that people know, but they don't talk about is that unlike other industries, our industry does not have any guaranteed retirement. And that is an extremely hard pill to swallow. I think once you understand it, because I think at the beginning, most people don't know it or they don't understand what that means. And they're like, it's fine, whatever. They live in the now. Our industry is very much living in the now. Which is good to some aspect because we have too many people living in the future and in the past.
Right.
But being present in the moment. But when you have so many people coming from other countries who are just so grateful to be on American soil, making American money, getting paid well, having clients that love them, being appreciated by their employers, they don't see that tomorrow someone could decide not to renew their visa and they go right back to their country, or their students could just decide to go with another teacher and they lose all their clients.
Right.
Or the competitions get canceled because of COVID. I mean, my gosh, things that we never knew would happen.
Yes,
and then all of a sudden, all these dancers are out of business. There are so many things that could go,
wrong,
sideways.
Yeah.
And then they're not putting any of that money towards retirement. There's no guarantee. We don't have 401ks in the ballroom dance world. No one's putting money towards your retirement for you. No employer. Everyone's independent contractors.
Yes.
And as fun as that is in the moment, because you're getting your full pay and you're not having taxes taken out, what happens at the end? And why I think this is what I want you to touch on. The question here is why what you do is so important for people to understand, because of the component of when you get to that finish line, you want to make sure you know what you're working with.
Right. So with that, I'm going to take it back to the situation I started with, kind of like my why I even got into this industry in the first place, and the situation with my mother, right? So we talk about retirement, and retirement is great if all is well, but more and more and more and more, like the numbers are outrageous. The number of people who get to retirement are not as well as they would want to be, right? Physically. So that whole thing of like, what if you need some kind of, medical help? Do you have the wherewithal to be able to cover that, let alone just live? And people are living longer too. So depending on how long, when it is that you choose to be done with your work life, you could have 25, 30 years ahead of you, right? Or more. It's very routine now to live into your 90s.
Totally.
Yeah. And so what systems do you have in place to make sure that you're fine, and that you can actually live a reasonable, comfortable life for those 25, 30 additional years? And so, that's a big focus of what I do is, live in the now, but as you live in the now, build for the future and kind of do both at once. So when we talk about the dance world, there are no 401ks. There are IRAs. So if you're not working with me with the strategies that I like to work with,
Right.
that's at least something you can be doing, right?
Sure.
Go open an IRA.
Yes.
I would advise to make it a Roth, not a traditional, just because of what we've already talked about with the taxes. I won't belabor that again, but be more in control. Have them tax the seed and not the harvest. Because when you're going into, and I'll explain that a little bit more, when you're going to traditional IRA, it sounds really good because it's pre-tax dollars that go in, and you're just deferring when the taxes will be paid. And so the idea is that when you get to the point of retirement, hopefully your tax burden or your tax rate is lower. And so the taxes you're going to have to pay will be less than if you paid them now. That's a cool story, bro, because we don't know what the tax system is going to be in 30, 40 years, right? Could it be lower? Could be. Could it be higher? Sure could.
Probably.
Have you looked around at what's going on?
Right.
And so I would rather take the hit now and tax what's going in, knowing that at the end I get to pull out tax-free income, right? I don't have to worry about taxes anymore. So that's why I'm all about Roths.
It's kind of like buying the forever stamps. When they go up, you still have I love it. Every time I pop a stamp, I mean, not like we mail things a lot, but you never now and again, I'm like, yeah, I don't know how much I paid for this stamp, but I know it's higher
I've
now.
never heard that analogy. It's like the forever stamp.
I love it.
That is so hilarious.
Forever stamps.
Forever stamps.
It
yes, buy
sense.
it now. You don't have to worry about it.
Right. Why would I pay for stamps that are going to sit there once every, couple of months? I have to, and then now I have to buy more stamps. Stop it.
Stop it. No, doing forever. So yes, just like the forever stamp, you go in, you're going to take the hit on taxes. Nobody loves to take the hit on taxes, but you take your hit and then you're done. And then it grows. And what's happened is that the harvest at the end isn't being taxed. Right. I mean, I love it because there's uncertainty around what's coming out if you'll have to consider the taxes too, right?
Right.
So that's one thing. So that's like, when we talk about paying ourselves first, that would be an element of like, at a minimum, if you do nothing else, you don't want to get into a whole thing, but you want to do something, Roth IRA, get it going. There are limits, unfortunately. They like you said earlier, the system is rigged against you.
Right. Totally.
You're like, do this, and you're like, but, there's always a but at least it's something to work with, right?
Right.
But on the other hand, with the strategies that I work with, and the reason why I love them so is because that can be really supportive of the retirement income, of the long-term care. And that's what I mean by like having a foundation where all the different things you would want to do in your life, you are accounting for them, right? And so how do we do that? The way we do that is because the underbelly, the chassis of the whole system actually is insurance. So there are these guarantees and insurances that go along with everything that you're doing. And one of those wonderful little attributes and benefits when we think about long-term care, for instance, because did you know that the need for long-term care is not considered a medical condition? And so like, if you actually got to the point of being able to collect Medicare, which I know, may not be the case for most of our audience, but if you got to the point of being able to collect Medicare, it doesn't cover long-term care.
Wow.
A lot of people are shocked to find that out. Like dementia is not considered a medical diagnosis.
Right.
And so you need to have other resources to help you in that kind of a situation.
Well, and that's the thing. You don't want to find that out when you're, like you said, this is
when
your mom's example is a perfect example of why we're doing this.
That's my lived experience.
We're not trying to wait until it's like waiting until you have, a sickness to go get help when you could be preventative about it.
Exactly right. It's the prevention rather than attempting to find a cure when sometimes that cure is really, really hard to find.
Right.
So, so the cool thing about some of these, when we set up a policy in this way is that everybody knows, get insurance, you get a death benefit. And so everybody thinks, insurance is all about the death benefit. Well, that's the whole point of this whole thing is that it's not, it's life insurance because it's for your life right now. And so one of the things that happens is that you take the death benefit that's supposed to be for once you pass, and you can actually accelerate a whole bunch of that, those funds in there, which are insurance funds, not the money you've put into the policy, but actually insurance funds. You can accelerate those in order to help pay for some of these costs.
Wow.
So that's very comforting. It's
Yeah.
not true long-term care. There's a separate insurance product out there called long-term care insurance that's super expensive, kind of almost unaffordable for a lot of people. So this is kind of a way to bridge that gap and get some funds to help support it, even though it's not, fully long-term care. So that's one thing. And I don't poo-poo that at all. It's super, super helpful and beneficial.
Right.
On the flip side of it, though, is if you're starting your system and you're putting your monies into your system, because of the compound growth, and we call it the infinite banking system, because literally for as long as you have your policy, which you'll have, it's a permanent policy you'll have for your entire life, it is compounding at all times. And it's compounding in a safe, guaranteed way, as opposed to the stock market. So you can set it up such that, and it gets stupid efficient after a while. Like it's ridiculous, where it gets to a point where if you're in the system long enough, the dollar you put in, it's worth more than the dollar you get out. And then you get to the point where you can choose, I would never advise somebody to do this, but you could choose to stop funding your system, and but because of the compounding, it's still generating, right?
Right.
So that's why some people like to say, oh, it's an investment, but we don't think of it as investment. It's really just like a supercharged savings vehicle, so that if you set it up properly, then you get to that point where you can now start drawing on it as income during retirement.
I love it.
So it's playing so many different, tunes for you.
Supercharged saving vehicle coming out next year by Tesla. No. It sounds so innovative.
That's hilarious.
Oh my God, I love it.
Yes, plug it in, charge it up.
That's it.
Yeah, but so when we're thinking about retirement income, that's just, a really kind of easy way to do it is to fund your future through this system. So it's funding your now, but it's also set up to continue to grow so that you can fund your future and start to draw an income for it, from it. And then the generational wealth, like that buzzword, this is like classic, because at some point, as an owner, you will graduate from this earth. Yes. That day will come. We don't know when. And when it does, you have beneficiaries on your policy that you're using to implement the system. So then they get some kind of a payout. And with the appropriate education and knowledge, what do? They create their own system using those funds, and it continues and goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
And if you're doing it right, like we say, be your own banker. And some of the ways we do about that is that you have branches of your bank. So everybody in the family has a policy. So your kids are going to have the proceeds that come from yours at some point in the future. They get to open up their system, but they already have one of themselves that they've been using to fund their life throughout their life already. And that's how it keeps growing. And the wealthy do this. They know this.
Right.
They are aware of it, and they're applying it. And oftentimes, maybe because they do have an abundance of funds, it's to help them additionally with their tax structures, right? So
sure.
We'll take the insurance proceeds to, cover tax burdens somewhere else. The point is that they know how to work the system in order for creating funds out of nowhere in a way to support their systems. And my intent is to make sure everybody gets aware. I mean, like if you can do it, why can't I? And why can't I teach others to do it too?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So it's like, take care of the now, make sure you're whole now, make sure, like, for business owners have capital. Business owners are trying to invest, whether it's that new, music system, because they need to upgrade their music system, or they need a new floor, or lighting needs to change in the studio, whatever it is. You're building up capital to go do things in your business.
Absolutely.
Protect that capital, be a steward of it, have it work for you. So you can not only take care of that, but have it grow at the same time. And create a system where you actually can take care of yourself after you're done with your business.
I think that's it too, is that the business, especially in our industry, you can't dance forever. So eventually you own a studio, and eventually, but then people end up selling things to other people as well. And it's not, where do we go from there?
Where do we go from there?
So this is really setting you up to really have so many options for yourself.
Optionality. control, intentionality, options. Like,
Amen to that.
don't feel to not ever feel as if you're forced to do something in a specific way
Correct.
because you don't have any other
Have
options,
the funds,
but to
yeah.
come to the table with all the options and all the knowledge to be able to make the best choice for you.
I love that. I love that so much. This is literally, I feel like we've given so much information and so much value in this, which I love, but I also want people to know that this is literally just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to what Embalia can teach you, and how you can learn more and create a better financial education for yourself. This is such a very, very, very important topic that, you know, wellness is not just mental and physical. Financial is the way of the world, and we have to just, the sooner you accept that and understand how to learn how this works, the easier your life will be.
Absolutely.
And we are so blessed and grateful to have people like you guiding us in this way, to help us, you know, because again, this is not widely taught. So you really have to seek out the people who understand how the system works. And again, everything's above board. This is not, we're not cheating any systems. This is creating systems within the laws of the, you know, of what's happening, and working within the boundaries of what we're allowed to do. And
Absolutely.
it's kind of like when they say, like, you know, as humans, we don't use most of our brain capacity, you know, the potential. And so that's the thing, is I think that, you know, the majority of the population is only, when they do their taxes and stuff, they're just doing the bare minimum.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's so much more that can be done, and so much more to be saved and learned and invested that nobody is teaching. And again, there's reasons why, we won't get into it, but we are, you know,
who does it benefits?
That's right.
For everybody to have this knowledge.
That's right.
Yes.
But if you are here and you are seeing this, you are hearing this, and you are part of the dance wellness community, or you want to be a part of it, this is going to help you in so many aspects of your life. And I am honored to have Embalia as a part of this community, because she is truly changing people's lives $1 at a time.
$1 at a time. Absolutely. $1 turned into $2 at a time. And it is truly a passion point. And I'm so excited to be part of the community and be able to offer, you know, all my knowledge. It's all conversations, getting into everyone's specific situation and having conversations about the best path forward to reach our goals. So
I love it.
So pleased to be here.
Yes, I love it so much. As I've said before in past episodes, all of the links and information, not just for Embalia, for the dance wellness community, are all in the show notes. If you would like to be getting our monthly newsletters, so you can learn more about, you know, what we do, dancewellnesscommunity.com. You can actually book a session to work with Embalia if you would like to. And if this is something that you're interested in, or something that you feel you need. And yeah, this is just the beginning, ladies and gentlemen. We're just giving you a taste, a little bit here and there of everyone and what we do. But we're really excited to bring more of this to you and really start to see how this can help so many more people in the masses.
Yes.
Thank you, Embalia, for being here and sharing
Thank
your
you.
knowledge.
No, I enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much.
Yes, absolutely. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we will see you next month.
Bye.
The secret is out and wow.